What's going on, everybody? It is Overreaction Time. Once again, I am your host, Simon Samano, and look who I got with me for this edition of the show. It is none other than the excellence of execution, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be, Canada's own Mike Bohn. What's up, my man? How are you?
What's up? I think that's the greatest podcast intro I've ever had before, so thank you for doing that.
Absolutely, dude. I had to do it. I had to do it for my guy up in the Great White North.
There we go. Yeah, perfect timing. What a week for Canada. We get a pay-per-view that's not completely garbage, as I'm sure we'll talk about. You're wearing the shirt. Good times all around.
Yeah, man. All right, dude. Hey, we've got a lot to talk about. A little bit from this past weekend, a lot from this past week. You ready to get this thing going?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, Kamikaze, you know what time it is. Hit it.
I mean, guys, what are you fucking... Is this tonight's stupid question night? Are you guys that fucking stupid? You can't be that fucking stupid. Who gives a shit? One of the dumbest things I've ever read in my life. Fucking common sense. Everybody knows that.
All right, Mike, here we go. Let's start at the very top from this past weekend at UFC Fight Night 252, otherwise known as UFC Seattle, where in the main event, we had Song Yadong facing Henry Cejudo. Weird ending in this fight, Mike, with the eye poke in the third round. Got to about a minute and 15 seconds. Minute 16 was left in that fight when Henry Cejudo was poked in the eye by Song Yadong. Took the entire 5 minutes, and then we finished off the round. And afterwards, Henry could not continue. We've seen now subsequently that he's had some, that definitely was serious, some blood in the eye. So it goes to the scorecards, and Song Yadong wins a technical decision with two scores of 29-28 and a 30-27. Now, last week on this show, I did say, Mike, that if Henry Cejudo couldn't beat Song Yadong, that he should retire. The gloves did not come off, though, afterwards. So let me just go ahead and hit you with this, Mike. Henry Cejudo will only hurt his legacy if he continues fighting.
Not an overreaction, just because you look at the history of the sport. Whatever you thought of the outcome here, right? Whether it should have been a no contest or a draw with a point deduction, which definitely should have been the case in my opinion. He's 37 years old. The losses are significantly outweighing the wins. 0-3 on paper now since coming out of retirement. Hasn't had a win in almost 5 years as of May. When that comes around, assuming he's not going to fight before then, so we will pass the 5-year mark. History shows it doesn't get better for anyone from this point on, no matter what your accolades or history in the sport is, and especially as you go down lower in the weight classes where Henry is at 135. Maybe something could happen at 125 for him, but still, like, we're defying the odds here regardless. So I don't know, like, even if they did a rematch right away, which doesn't seem Dana White wants or the UFC wants, but let's say they did, I don't think Henry winning that fight would make a significant difference here anyways. So yeah, he's in a rough spot. Henry Cejudo spent a lifetime overcoming odds, youngest male Olympic champion, all these things that he has done, 2-division UFC champion who defended, but the odds are just so stacked against him at this point, and the bantamweight division is insane. So I can't see a world where he is able to do enough that would consider our outlook different on where his career is at right now.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of here, Mike, is something that's like a Legends fight or something like that. Like a Jose Aldo. I don't know, like an actual like retirement fight. Like you can hype that up as a retirement fight. Like Henry can say it's his retirement fight. He's about to fight one of the guys who's one of the greatest or the greatest, bantamweight of all, featherweight of all time. Fight him in the bantamweight division. Is that about the only thing that's left for Henry? Just go that route, because a run at the title is done. And I don't even think that would happen if he were able to cut the weight to get back to flyweight.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, I think if he did flyweight, he could, even on a 3-fight losing streak, maybe walk into a title shot, especially if, like, Manel Kape loses this weekend. If the rumored fight with Kai Kara France happens for Pantoja and he wins that, he will be very, depleted on contenders. So I think Henry could get that, but UFC does not seem to like him very much. We know Dana White's demeanor at these post-fight press conferences now. You didn't have to be a genius to know that his love for Henry Cejudo was not present there and hasn't been since he retired as a champion. So I don't think they're going to do him any favors either, right? Like I posted just a few minutes ago our matchmaker graphic where I said Henry versus either Jose Aldo, who you mentioned, Chito Vera, 2 fights that have been scheduled to happen in the past. And you see people in the comments being like, nah, UFC is going to give him Marcus McGee, like someone like that, you know? So like, I don't think that's crazy unrealistic. So I would like to see some of these fights. What is the UFC willing to give him is a greater question.
All right, man. And the last thing I just want to ask you about Henry, do you think he ultimately will regret the fact that he retired when he did 5 years ago?
I think so. I think he probably already does. And yeah, I mean, this is what we're all seeing right here. If you told me he'd be fighting a Song Yadong 5 years ago, like probably wouldn't have believed you. So yeah, this is all trying to make up what was lost there, and he hasn't won a fight. So how could you not?
Gave away his prime years, man. It's a shame. It's a shame. Well, I think we'll always kind of wonder what could have been with Henry Cejudo.
Mm-hmm.
All right, man. Let's move on. We're going to move away from the fights this past week because we got a lot to talk about with all the news that was broken last week, Mike. So we're going to hit it one by one. You know I'm going to hit you with these overreactions. Not really overreactions, all right? But let's see what you think. Starting at the top here, okay, with the fact that Ilia Topuria ultimately was announced by the UFC that he will be vacating the featherweight title. Hasn't yet. It's one of those things where when the first punch is thrown, he's going to vacate. And that's because the first punch being thrown would be in a title fight that happens between Diego Lopes and former champ Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 314.
Mm-hmm.
A lot to talk about here with those two things, but I'm going to start here with Ilia. You might know where I'm going with this, all right? Nobody should have a problem with Ilia Topuria's move to lightweight. He's doing it right. He's doing it the right way. He's doing it the right way.
He is. So I guess I'll say not an overreaction. I mean, I think I could see some people not being thrilled with the way this is unfolding, especially Islam Makhachev, who's made his feelings very clear, I think, about an Ilia Topuria fight. Although I do think if the UFC offered it to him, he would take it. But yeah, I don't think you can complain too much about the way this unfolded. He put the division before himself, assuming everything Dana White said was accurate. We have yet to hear, as the time of this recording, from Ilia himself, outside of some faint reporting out of Russia that's a teammate of Ilia said whatever. We haven't heard directly from the horse's mouth when it comes to this, but Dana said, he feels he's done everything he can do in the division. I disagree with that, but he can't make the weight anymore comfortably. I think that is the one you have to circle big time.
Respect that one at least.
Yeah, Ilia has missed weight before or had to pull out of a fight like on fight week because he wasn't able to make the weight. So this is something clear to him. He's spoke about lightweight for years. He's fought at lightweight in the UFC once against Jai Herbert. So the precedent is there for a foundation for him to move up. It's just all the circumstances around it. Him being a standing UFC champion, feeling like he's on the cusp of being one of the sport's great true superstars, and then you feeling like if he did go to lightweight, they had this easy champion versus champion promotional tool to do with him having the belt. But who knows how long that's going to be? Does he want to build his body up for 6 to 8 months to be a true lightweight, as opposed to just going in there without the proper timing? So a lot of questions to still ask him, but yeah, like on paper, allowing the division to move on, citing all the reasons, whether you agree or disagree with them, it was all there fair. So I don't think it's an overreaction to say he did this properly.
Yeah, I mean, that was my whole thing. I the weight was the big thing. I'm not saying that he's accomplished everything he could accomplish at featherweight. Clearly, he had challenges behind him. Movsar Evloev, Diego Lopes. He could have taken those fights. But I have said on this program before, knocking out Max and knocking out Volk in one calendar year. Really feeling like that's like the pinnacle of that division. I understand where Ilia's coming from. I respect the fact that we'll see, he's willing to give up the title, but do you foresee here, this is a little tricky, do you see here though that he would give up the featherweight title willingly and not get a title shot against Islam right away because because you're giving away financial security when you give up the title? It can't just be to fight somebody in the top 5 of lightweight, can it?
I mean, it could be depending on timing. I don't think it's unrealistic. And Dana White said it himself when asked this question essentially directly at the UFC Seattle post-fight press conference. He said, it's not a lock that it'll be Islam. We're looking at other options. And, after all this news broke, I kind of threw you like my crazy theory on Slack, what I think could maybe see happening here. I could see Ilia fighting another guy, we have heard Charles Oliveira has been promised the title shot. And I said on the show before, with the Sean Strickland scenario, right, at middleweight, there was all a fight that we kind of desired more in Khamzat Chimaev, but the UFC allegedly gave Sean Strickland their promise, their word. He was next. They ended up living up to it. We can say that was a bad decision in hindsight, but I want to be on the side of the fighters here. And if you are getting promises from the UFC, hopefully they would stick to those. So if we do get, say, a Charles Oliveira fight with Islam Makhachev in the summer, maybe Ilia fights a Dustin Poirier or something like that, and then we end up getting the winners against each other. If you're a Dustin Poirier fan, if you're a supporter, obviously we are over here, I would be sad to kind of see him fight Topuria in his retirement fight, because I think that would be really difficult for him. But if you're trying to use whatever is left of Dustin Poirier's star power, do a clean transition for Ilia into the lightweight division with a top-ranked guy who is beloved across the sport, you could do a lot worse than having him beat Dustin Poirier and then setting up a title shot after that. So I do think it is in play. It's just a question of behind the scenes, like, did the UFC still promise him pay-per-view points? Dustin Poirier said as recently, I think, to MMA Fighting yesterday, that his fight for retirement will likely be in New Orleans and it'll potentially be a pay-per-view. If both guys are getting pay-per-view points, you could still have Ilia versus Dustin headline a numbered UFC events. So the options are in play here. I do think Ilia could end up fighting someone else before, but it's just going to be, is Islam Makhachev's team willing to draw a line in the sand in the stance of feeling Ilia has to do something at lightweight first?
Right.
And has the promise been made to Charles Oliveira? So I think those could be the wrenches in play here.
Okay, well, let me just throw one more wild card at you. Where could Max Holloway fit into all of this? BMF championship, Mike. BMF championship. Could we get a BMF title between Ilia and Max Holloway, perhaps?
A rematch? I mean, it's a hard sell, right? After we just saw in that fight, it would be tough. I mean, for Max,
you could do it though. If you were going to make an exception of a rematch off of a knockout like that, because that fight was pretty good up until that point.
It was,
it was one of those, like, it was going pretty well. It was really entertaining. I don't know, man. You could sell me on a rematch between those two guys.
Yeah, I think
Max
it would be just
the first knockout of his career.
Yeah, just the only thing that's tough for me is, like, we just saw that as a title fight at featherweight, and now we're gonna do it again at lightweight when, like, Ilia.
You're right. You're right. If he's gonna prove himself against somebody, he's gonna prove himself against an actual lightweight. Max still has the featherweight, feeling to him as well. It's probably got to be someone like Dustin or Charles or someone else in the top 5, maybe an arm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, given that scenario I just said, if Ilia does end up fighting Islam Makhachev next, I think the easy move staring you in the face is you do Charles and Max, the rematch for the BMF title. That's an easy move for me. And then, I don't know where that leaves Arman Sarukian, but lightweight's tricky right now. These aren't bad problems to have, though, I don't think. No,
lightweight looks like it could be real fun coming up real soon. All right, man. All right, let's move on now to the other component of this, right? So with Ilia vacating, Diego Lopes is going to face Alexander Volkanovski. So let me just go ahead and hit you with this, all right? Diego Lopes faces more pressure than Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 314.
Overreaction, yeah. I don't think so. I mean, no one's calling Diego Lopes already washed on Twitter. People question where Volk is at. People thought the Ilia rematch with Volkanovski was just going to be like an execution, but it was like a favor for Volk given everything he has done in the sport. But how many people are out there saying, I really want to see this fight because I think Volk just did this and that and he can adjust in the rematch? I mean, there is a huge question mark over that first fight given the turnaround Volkanovski did make after the Makhachev knockout to fight Ilia, but that is now gone. I think a lot of people have doubt around Volk though. So now it's like, oh, you're fighting another guy who's in his late 20s, who's extremely dangerous. Like, there is that little element of counting it out. And you could make the case this title shot is a borrowed gift for Diego Lopes there anyways, right? Like, we were expecting Ilia and Volk 2 to be next. Maybe Diego would rematch Movsar, who is his only UFC loss in a tough stylistic matchup for him. So for him to be in the spot, like, you could make the argument Movsar should have got it over him because he has the win and the undefeated record and the more UFC wins. So, like, if he loses here, you're already thinking there was a guy who should have been there before him and that he wasn't going to get the shot anyways. So I don't think there's more pressure on Diego. He can rebuild from a loss here. If Volk loses, it's tough times.
Interesting. All right. I look at it differently. I think Volk's playing with house money. I think the fact that he's, lost 3 of his last title fights, the fact that he's on back-to-back title fight losses and he's getting one, that's why I feel like I don't think he has a lot of pressure. I mean,
well, I feel like we're making the same argument for both guys, right? Like,
we are
almost getting the gift here. Because let's just say, Volk,
more of a gift for Volk.
Yes,
don't know.
but
That's
say
what I feel
Volk
like.
loses, or no, let's say Volk wins, recaptures the title. Does anyone think he's going to be here for another 4-year title reign or anything, right? Like you would have to imagine he's not going to be there too long. And you're like, well, if Ilia, things don't go well for him at lightweight, he could come right back down to featherweight and maybe take that belt back. So like even if Volk does get it, that is a legacy stamp for him to be able to regain the belt for his future UFC Hall of Fame induction that is inevitable. But like I don't think he's sticking around long anyways. So even if he wins, fights 3 more times, retires, I think Diego Lopes probably finds himself in a title fight again before it's over anyways.
Interesting. All right, man. I appreciate that. I'm not gonna push back any further, Mike. You seem very, very strong on that one. I'm gonna respect it. Okay.
All right.
All right. Let's go now to another fight I want to talk about. UFC 314. I feel good about this one. The fact that Michael Chandler is fighting Paddy Pimblett. All right. Paddy getting the Michael Chandler fight. You remember when you were on the beginning of the year show, Mike? The conversation was it with you? No, it was with
wasn't
Danny.
with me.
It was with Danny, but you remember I had said that was the fight I was hoping to see, and I'm so happy that we're about to see it. Michael Chandler, Paddy Pimblett at UFC 314. Is it 5 rounds?
Yep.
And it's a 5-rounder. All right, Mike. You know what I said back then? I said Paddy was going to finish in the top 5 by the end of this year. So it would only stand to reason that I would hit you with this.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Chandler will prove if Paddy Pimblett is legit or all hype.
Not an overreaction. I think that's a fair way to look at this fight. I mean, Michael Chandler, you can think whatever you want about his UFC career. It has been rocky, but it has been high profile all along the way in terms of the fights and the stages and the opponents and stuff. So like this is categorically a major step down for Michael Chandler, given everyone else he has fought inside the octagon so far, and categorically a step up for Paddy Pimblett when you look at it on the other side. So I don't know how you couldn't say this is a very defining matchup for both of these guys at this point. And if Paddy wins, especially if he wins in like a similar way as he did King Green or something, that would be a huge statement for him. But I think what I like so much about that point you brought up at the beginning of the year of Paddy getting to the top 5, this was the matchup that you circled to be like, who's the most winnable fight there for him and who's something that could line up if things don't work out for Chandler with Connor and all these different things. It was right there. So I'm glad they made it. And that's what it will elevate Paddy here if he wins. So yeah, Chandler by far the best guy. He's fought for better or worse. How will Michael Chandler fight in this fight? God only knows, but this is a good one.
Yeah, dude. I mean, listen, whatever you think, you hit some of the themes that I was going to touch on here, which is whatever you think of Michael Chandler and whether he belongs in the rankings where he's at, because he's 2 and 4 in the UFC. Mm-hmm. He's ranked number 7. It's a generous ranking, I think, still for Michael Chandler in those rankings. But regardless of that, he is a ranked fighter. He's just outside the top 5. And the biggest thing is he's got a championship pedigree. He's a multiple-time Bellator champion. So this for Paddy, this is everything for him. Like if you're going to be UFC champion the way that you've been working up towards for the past, since he made his debut 3 or 4 years ago, it's been a while, it's been a slow build. It's been a really slow build. Like this is the one. You win this one, maybe come the end of the year in December, my top 5 thing can come to fruition, Mike, because there's a fight that could happen later on in the year. My question to you is, what do you think that could be if he's able to beat Michael Chandler? Could it be maybe the Justin Gaethje Dan Hooker winner later this year? Could that be the one?
Yeah, I think that's a great choice. Very much in play. I think 2 more fights that could be winnable for him. And those are the guys that feel like kind of the odd men out as we talk about everything we just did with Ilia and Islam and Arman Sarukian and all those things, Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier. That feels like the one that makes sense, unless they give Justin Gaethje to Poirier or Hooker to Poirier for his retirement fight, which feels like it could be in play as well. Definitely. Even the loser of that fight, I think, would be still a step up for Paddy in that regard. So yeah, I don't think the path is unrealistic to him getting there, especially if Islam continues to dominate this division, right? Like say he does fight Ilia in the summer international fight week and then fights Charles or Arman at the end of the year. Like at that point, and if he's not going to welterweight, we are out of options in terms of lightweight. So I don't think they would hesitate for a second to give Paddy Pimblett that opportunity. This is very much reminiscent of like the Sean O'Malley, Piotr Jan matchmaking. Obviously Piotr Jan, I consider him in higher regard than Michael Chandler at this point.
Chandler, yeah.
The leap in the rankings, the perception, all that stuff. It's all kind of lining up with that. So yeah, if Paddy wins this, he is in a great placement, and I think he'll continue to be matched up carefully if they have a path to get him there.
And I'm not saying, okay, so let me just throw one more thing at you, Mike. I'm not saying that he would jump the line and cut anybody, but let's just say he beat Michael Chandler in some sort of spectacular fashion, some sort of viral fashion.
Mhm.
Do you think that's the one win that he would need, a la Sean O'Malley, that they would give him a title shot for his next fight? I'm not saying he would jump the line or jump anybody, but like, do you think that would be enough to capitalize on his stardom right there? Let's not risk him losing to someone else, whoever that may be next. Let's give him the title shot after that. Not jump the line, just that's his next fight.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, given all these names we just said, a lot of stuff would have to break in his way, people being injured, maybe someone negotiating themselves out of a fight or something, but he would have the resume, he'd have the backing, if, like I said, those 2 fights happen and they're like, hey, we go to London every March and we want you to sit out for 10 months, Paddy, and you'll get a title shot, around then, that's when we'll be ready to do something. Like the timing, it's everything with these fights. So I don't think it is crazy. It feels a little unrealistic just given how good lightweight is. But I don't think it's absolutely out of play.
All right, cool. Well, I'm excited, man. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think I'm more excited about that fight than I am the main event. Come 314. It's good, man. I can't wait. I can't wait to see. And I can't wait for Paddy to prove me right. Can't wait for Paddy to prove me right. All right, Mike. One more thing we got to talk about from UFC 314, and that's the fact that UFC signed Patricio Pitbull, former Bellator champion. They signed him. He got his release from the PFL. He gets signed by the UFC, and they go ahead and they book him against Yair Rodriguez at UFC 314. I'm just going to come straight out and hit you with this, Mike. Yair Rodriguez is a perfect first test for Patricio Pitbull's debut.
Yeah, not an overreaction. I think what more could you ask for? A top 5 guy, dangerous on the feet, dangerous on the ground, a former interim featherweight champion as well in Yair Rodriguez. I mean, this is perfection, honestly. Like, what more could you want outside of maybe him walking straight into a title shot, which, given how good this division is right now, I don't think would have been warranted here. Sounds like the other options potentially on the table for this debut were Aljamain Sterling as one, Movsar Evloev as the other. If you compare this matchup to those two, I mean, what are you more excited for? It's not even a question, all respect to those guys, but like, I want to see Pitbull bang with someone and like give us a thriller in his first fight in the UFC, not have to spend the whole time defending takedowns or Aljamain Sterling's weird little side kicks and stuff like that. So this is the one that I love, and we're going to find out where's Pitbull at. And man, he wins this. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he gets a title fight the one after that.
I was going to ask you, man. I was going to ask you, you think that would be enough for him to get a title shot afterwards?
Like I said, all about the timing. It's possible. Like, if he wins this spectacularly and they're sitting there looking at him or Movsar to fight either Volkanovski or Diego, like, who do you think they're going to go with? And it seems like they like his mentality. I mean, Pitbull did an interview with Nolan King for our site the day after he signed, and he basically alluded to like they didn't want him to sign, and there was a very high-ranking member of the UFC brass, he wouldn't name who it was, who did not want.
He's got a chip on his shoulder, man. He's got a chip on his shoulder coming in.
Yeah, and then Dana said on Saturday that, like, kind of reinforced that and said a phone call with Pitbull is what kind of changed things. So it's kind of reminiscent of the Michael Chandler story, right? Like, he's like, I got on the phone with this guy, I had some reservations, and just what he said and how he talked to me, it was convincing. And I think Pitbull brings that same mentality. He seemingly accepted every opponent, every date. He's willing to fight Yair in the main event, 5 rounds in Mexico City on like 8 weeks notice. Like, this guy's willing to do whatever. He has the mentality the UFC wants. So if he goes in there and handles his business in the cage, like, he'll be willing to do whatever. And I think they appreciate that, and they would allow him that type of opportunity.
Yeah, I love, I love the fact that Patricio is going to come into this with a chip on his shoulder. Like, I don't know, man. Like, the motivation will be there. I think.
Who do we think it was that didn't want him? Was it Dana, Mick, Hunter, or Sean?
It wasn't Dana. I don't think it was Dana or Hunter.
Sean, probably, because that's his division.
I think it was Sean. Yeah, I think it was Sean. One of the matchmakers. I think from a business standpoint, Dana and Hunter would see the value there, but from the matchup standpoint and matchmaking standpoint, it would have been Sean or Mick. Yeah, it would have been one of those two guys.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because Dana said that same press conference that Sean absolutely loves Aaron Pico, and like, when he loves a guy that much, good things will happen for him. So
yeah, man,
that one's probably looming as well.
Do you think? Last thing, real quick. Do you think Patricio, like this Does he need to validate himself with some success in this UFC run? Like, do you feel Michael Chandler has validated himself? Do you feel like Michael Page has validated himself? Right, these guys that come up from Bellator and these guys are coming over late. Does Patricio need to do something great, spectacular, at least fight for a title to validate his, his greatness? He's a great Bellator fighter,
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think he does actually to a degree, because there has been people who have been out there saying this guy is the number one in the world. He said it for himself, when Volkanovski is champion, when Max
They
Holloway
chirp
is
at
champion.
each other. Yeah.
Yeah, like he would always, say these things, but he never had the opportunity. Even Michael Chandler at his peak, right? Did we ever say like this guy's gonna beat Habib? He's gonna be, McGregor, when they were at their absolute peaks and he was over in Bellator? Like, I don't think people are saying those would be fun fights. Chandler's got the power, but like no one's made that argument. No one said MVP is the best welterweight in the world, even despite all his success. Like, Pitbull's had that attached to him, and he's been, I think, number one in our MMA Junkie rankings multiple times. So
Yeah.
like he needs a little bit of that.
Respect.
If he comes over and loses to Yair and then loses to Arnold Allen and then loses to some other person and that's it, and you're like, oh, was it maybe just too late? He's 37. Did he have too many wars in Bellator? Those questions will be asked, but like he needs to win some fights. Does he need to get to the belt, win the belt? Maybe not. But if he has like a terrible run and fizzles out, then I think that will hurt his standing for sure.
Yeah. Well, regardless of what happens, I think he and Volk have to fight at some point before it's all said and done, because they were the concurrent champions at the same time. They did chirp with each other. Doesn't have to happen now. And who knows? Maybe it lines up where that's a title fight. The pieces are there.
Could happen at UFC 314, where one injury from Diego Lopes.
Could be. Away. You're right, dude. It could happen at 314. You never know. Dana doesn't even want to talk about having a replacement, but that fight has to happen at some point. I can't wait to talk about it.
Agreed.
All right, man. We're going to move on now to UFC 315. It was part of the announcement palooza last week, and UFC London. All right. We had a shakeup, a whole switcheroo, man, a whole shakeup here, where we were expecting to see Belal Muhammad against Shavkat Rakhmonov. We found out that Shavkat's injured, so he is not fighting for the title next. In is Jack Della Maddalena, who's going to fight Belal Muhammad in the main event of UFC 315. Well, that only happened because they removed Jack Della Maddalena from the UFC London main event, and now who gets a great opportunity against Leon Edwards? It's none other than Sean Brady. Hopefully you kept up with all that. Yep. Let me go and hit you with this, Mike. Belal Muhammad caught a break, but Leon Edwards got shafted by the UFC's switcheroo.
Not an overreaction. I think that's fair. I mean, I think Belal has a good chance of beating both Shavkat and Jack, but yeah, I mean, the guy who hasn't fought in 2 years, coming off a serious hand injury, and has to travel as far as you possibly can from Australia to fight the fight, as opposed to the guy who's 19-0 with 18 finishes, sure, like, and already went through a full training camp pretty much for Belal as well. Yeah, you would have to imagine that is probably the easier fight. I mean, Jack has had some issues with grappling as well. So yeah, I think that's a tougher one. Leon is the part is a little bit trickier. I do think the switch up on short notice is tough.
Yeah,
really different style.
4 weeks, completely different style, and everything you just talked about. Dude, they did him wrong. You don't think they did Leon wrong? And then it's in England, and this happens to him, dude. They did him dirty.
I mean, I don't know if they did him dirty. Both fights are tough. I saw someone make this point, right? We bring the short notice part. I think it was John Anik, actually. I saw his podcast. Like, we talk about the 4 weeks, but you're talking about a guy in Leon Edwards who spent the last 3 years of his career preparing for Belal Muhammad, for Kamaru Usman multiple times, for Colby Covington. Like, Sean Brady isn't some radically different style he's never seen before. It's the same thing,
That's
probably
true.
worse in terms of striking than past several guys. I don't know how I'd rate Sean's compared to Colby's, but still, like, not equal at best. So I do think that's maybe that element is probably a little bit of an overreaction, because I do think Leon should be prepared for something like this, given the past training camps. Sean is the one getting in the tougher spot here. He wasn't expecting to fight this fight for 5 rounds on a different time zone, all that different stuff. So I disagree on the Leon part. I agree on the Belal part, I think.
Okay, that's fair. But this really does feel like kind of a I don't know. I know you said it's tough for Sean Brady, but this is also kind of a gift. It's kind of a blessing. Like, what a
100%.
golden opportunity, man. You beat Leon Edwards. That's it. You stake a claim to a title shot, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's fresh off being the champion. You beat him in
I know
enemy
he's got the
territory,
loss to
short notice.
Belal. I know he lost to Belal, but I mean, like, dude, if you beat Leon, that's your title shot.
For sure. And this is his redemption story, right? Like Sean Brady is forever going to be known as, pretty much the only guy who's been finished by Belal Muhammad in the UFC, as tough as that was. But his redemption story is, coming back from that and maybe earning a rematch at some point. So I don't think that's crazy. The bigger question is, did Leon Edwards get shafted here by not being the first call to replace against Belal? I know that fight was terrible and we're not keen to see that trilogy, but he is the most recent champion and the opportunity to go is right there.
I'm okay. I'm okay not seeing that.
Poor Leon Edwards, man. I know.
But dude, poor Leon Edwards, he's got a history of getting screwed over by the UFC, man. Remember when they pulled him out of the rankings several years back because they were pressuring him to fight Khamzat Chimaev? Like, he was on the shelf for like 15 months.
3 times though.
Huh?
He did take that Khamzat fight 3 times, and Khamzat was the one who pulled out twice.
And it just never happened. Yeah, he did. He was ready. But from that standpoint, though, the UFC was trying to feed him to Khamzat. Like, they were doing everything they could to feed him to kind of like avoid the title shot for him, the title fight, right? So, dude, I don't know. Just seems like one of those guys that the UFC has it out for. But anyways, we'll see how it shakes out with those 2 fights.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mike, we're gonna talk one more thing, UFC 315, and that's the co-main event. All right, co-main event is between Valentina Shevchenko, who's going to put her women's flyweight title on the line against Manon Fiorot. I love saying that name, Manon Fiorot. That fight is happening now. It's been a while since Manon's fought, right, Mike? It's been about,
I think, a year, March of last year against Erin Blanchfield.
And it will have been 14 months by the time, right? Roughly 14 months since the last time she fought. But this is a really compelling fight, in my opinion. So much so that I'm going to hit you with this, Mike. Valentina Shevchenko versus Manon Fiorot is the best women's fight we will get this year.
Ooh. Does that include potential champion versus champion fights or no?
Well, that's part of it here. I mean, I don't know. Like, do we think we're going to get what? Are you thinking about Zhang Weili against Valentina later this year?
I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about Kayla Harrison maybe versus Amanda Nunes if things pan out that way.
Wow. Is that realistic? Can we get that by December, do you think?
If they're fighting, in the summer, as is being reported, Juliana and Kayla, I don't think it's impossible that we could maybe see Amanda come back late year.
Wait, you're hitting me with a news flash right now here, Mike. What? What? They're talking about this?
No, I'm saying like the fight between Kayla Harrison and Juliana Pena for the title is being rumored to happen in the summer.
Right.
And then
Not gonna
I think the winner of that calls out Amanda Nunes. And if it's Kayla Harrison, I don't think it's crazy that Amanda comes back and fights her.
At the end of the year.
Yeah.
Got you. I take back my news flash. Okay. Well,
so yes, to go back to the beginning, I'll say overreaction, but it is up there. It is one of the best fights that could be made, and one that's actually realistic. Talking about current active fighters,
that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah,
all that stuff. I agree. I think divisional wise, number 1 contender versus a champion, or a ranked contender versus a champion. This is it. If we're not talking about unretiring fighters, crossover fights between champions, we're talking about in a standing division, then yes, not an overreaction.
I mean, in order to get a better fight than this one later, and again, I'm saying this in February, so there's plenty of time, right? Like, we got 10 months. Part of why this is an overreaction, but it's not really. But what I'm saying is, in order for us to get a better fight, Valentina needs to win this one, so that maybe we get Valentina against Zhang Weili later on, or with Juliana potentially not fighting this summer, and that putting that Kayla Harrison fight on hold, or whatever the case is, or if that fight does happen, and Kayla wins, Kayla has to win, then we got to get Amanda to come out of retirement. Like, so many things have to happen, I feel like, for us to get a better women's fight. Whereas right here, we have 2 women who are ranked top 5 pound for pound. I mean, at the moment, like, this is it. This is the one. This will be the best fight we get for the rest of this year, unless some things break and the timing works out. So that's where I'm at, Mike.
I agree. The best fight on paper. In reality, I don't know how good this one's going to be. I do have some trepidation about how this actually.
How do you think it plays out? Yeah, break it down.
All those things, but yeah, like it is fascinating. I love this because Valentina has obviously ran this division essentially since its inception, sans Nico Montano, who was a flash in the pan champion there. But she's beat the fighters who came like before her. She's beat her current generation. And then now she beats someone like Manon, who I know is a little older. I think she's 34, but I would still consider part of the like crop that came after Valentina. If she wins this, I think like that beyond legendary status, her winning that trilogy, getting that belt back with Grasso, and then winning a fight like this, man, like she's already a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I think that brings her resume into like the territory where we talk about the GSPs, the John Joneses, the people who have beat multiple generations of fighters. So this is huge for Valentina's legacy, and it's a real tough one. I'm actually looking forward to seeing them on Wednesday at the press conference in Montreal for the on sale of this event.
Heck yeah, man. Can't wait to find out what they have to say to each other. It's also going to be Belal and Jack Della Maddalena will be there, and Mike Bohn will be there covering it for us. He's going to make the trip over to Montreal. All right, Mike. Well, the time for overreacting has come to an end. I appreciate you for being back on the show, my man. Did you enjoy?
Yes, always. It's a great time. I have told you many times I love this format, so I think this has been a great addition to Junkie over the past few months here, and can't wait to see it keep growing.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you. And for everybody watching, I appreciate you guys so much. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It means a lot. And until next time, we will see you on Overreaction Time. So long.
MMA Junkie AI.